The wind carried the cool scent of autumn leaves as Eleanor stepped outside, pulling her scarf tighter around her neck. She was in her late 60s, her silver hair tucked neatly under a hat, her eyes still holding the warmth of someone who had seen much of life but still carried hope. Her grandson Daniel stood by the car, holding open the passenger door for her like the gentleman he had grown into. At 25, he was tall, thoughtful, and reserved, a young man who carried himself with quiet strength. "Ready, Grandma?" he asked with a small smile. She nodded, grateful for his company. Ever since her husband passed, these small gestures of care meant the world to her. They were heading to the family's old cabin, a place tucked away by the edge of the woods. It wasn't far, just an hour's drive, but Eleanor cherished these rides more than the destination. She climbed into the car slowly, and Daniel made sure she was settled before closing the door gently. Once he slid into the driver's seat and started the engine, the familiar hum filled the air. The town slowly gave way to open roads, framed by trees painted in gold and red. Eleanor leaned back, letting the motion of the car and the beauty outside settle her. She noticed quickly, though, that Daniel wasn't himself. Normally, he would fill the drive with conversation, stories about work, updates about his friends, or questions about her memories from years past. Today, though, he said little. His eyes stayed on the road, his hands gripped the wheel tightly, and his jaw looked set in thought. Eleanor studied him quietly. She had raised her children, and now she watched her grandson growing into his own. She knew the signs. Silence wasn't just silence with Daniel. It was a shield, something hiding deeper emotions. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" she said softly, trying to open the space for him. He nodded, giving a polite smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. She could see something was weighing on him. She didn't push. Instead, she let the car fill with the sounds of the road, the steady hum of tires against pavement, the faint whistle of wind sneaking through the windows, the rustle of leaves as they passed. Sometimes silence was its own language, and Eleanor was patient enough to listen. The highway curved gently, and the trees stood tall like quiet witnesses to their journey. Eleanor's mind drifted back to when Daniel was just a boy, sitting in the back seat, chattering endlessly about school, about dreams of being an astronaut, a pilot, or even a writer. He had always been curious, always full of wonder. Now he looked older, carrying a weight she wished she could take from him. She sighed softly, wishing her late husband were here. He had always known how to ease Daniel's worries. But now, that role had fallen to her. She reached into her small handbag and pulled out a wrapped candy. She always carried them for long rides. She offered one to Daniel. He gave her a faint smile as he accepted it, unwrapping it with one hand while still driving. For a moment, the car filled with the familiar scent of mint. It was a small comfort, but it softened the edges of the silence. Eleanor placed her hand gently on his arm. "You've been quiet today, Daniel," she said softly. "Is something on your mind?" Daniel's grip on the wheel tightened. He glanced at her, then quickly looked back at the road. His lips parted as though he might say something, but then he shut them again, exhaling through his nose. The hesitation told Eleanor everything. He wasn't just tired or distracted. Something heavy sat on his chest, something he didn't know how to share. Eleanor turned her gaze back to the trees passing by. She knew better than to demand answers. Instead, she gave him space. "You don't have to say anything until you're ready," she said gently. "But remember, Daniel, I've lived a long life. There isn't much I haven't seen or heard. Whatever it is, you can trust me." Her words lingered in the air. Daniel's shoulders shifted slightly, as though the weight on them pressed even harder. He exhaled again, but this time it wasn't frustration, it was nerves. "Grandma," he began, his voice lower than usual. The word carried something behind it, something fragile. He hesitated, then went quiet again, his eyes fixed on the long stretch of road ahead. Eleanor's heart tugged. She wanted to reach into his chest and ease whatever storm was brewing there, but she knew confessions couldn't be rushed. They had to come in their own time. She folded her hands on her lap and gave him her silence, letting him know he didn't have to fight alone. The car rolled on, steady and unhurried, giving him the safety of time. Minutes passed, but Eleanor's patience never wavered. She thought of the cabin ahead, the place where their family had celebrated countless summers, birthdays, and quiet evenings by the fire. She wondered if this trip might mark another memory, one Daniel would carry long after her. She looked at him again, seeing not just her grandson, but the man he was becoming. Strong, yet vulnerable. Brave, yet afraid. The sky above shifted, clouds drifting lazily across the sun. Light and shadow danced over Daniel's face, making him look older than his years. Finally, Eleanor saw it, the moment when his defenses began to crack. His lips pressed together, his throat worked as though holding back words, and his eyes softened with something unspoken. Eleanor's pulse quickened slightly, not from fear, but from knowing. She had felt this before, those rare moments when someone was about to reveal a piece of their soul. She leaned slightly closer, not pushing, but simply making herself present. "Whatever it is, Daniel," she whispered, "you don't have to carry it alone." He glanced at her then, really looked at her, and the expression in his eyes almost broke her heart. It was raw, full of conflict and longing. Then, just as quickly, he turned back to the road, swallowing hard. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't empty. It was heavy with words unspoken, thick with the promise of what was coming. Eleanor folded her hands again, her heart steady, her patience unshaken. She knew her grandson was standing on the edge of something important. As the car moved smoothly down the winding road, Eleanor realized this was more than a simple trip to the cabin. Something was waiting inside Daniel's heart, something he had never shared before. She didn't know what it was yet, but she could feel the weight of it pressing closer. And she knew, before they reached their destination, that secret would no longer stay hidden. The steady hum of the tires filled the car as Daniel kept his eyes on the road. The sun had begun to dip lower, streaking the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. Eleanor sat quietly, watching her grandson from the corner of her eye. Indy's profile was tense, his jawline sharp in the fading light, his lips pressed tightly as though holding back 1,000 words. She had always admired Daniel's calm nature, but this silence felt different. It carried weight, almost like a storm waiting to break. She shifted in her seat and folded her hands in her lap. For years, she had been the person her family leaned on, the one who listened without judgment. Daniel knew that about her, but still, she could see the struggle inside him. She decided to try again, her voice soft and steady. "Daniel, you've been so quiet, sweetheart. What's troubling you?" Her words broke through his wall, if only a little. His grip on the steering wheel tightened, his knuckles pale against the black leather. He took a slow breath, as if testing his own courage. For a moment, she thought he might stay silent, but then he answered, his voice low and uncertain. "Grandma, there's something I've been meaning to tell you. I just never knew how." Eleanor's heart skipped. She leaned back slightly, giving him space but keeping her gaze gentle. "Take your time," she said. "You know you can tell me anything." Daniel flicked his eyes toward her, and she caught the flicker of vulnerability there. Then, as quickly as it appeared, he looked back at the road. His shoulders rose and fell with a deep sigh. He didn't speak right away, but she could sense his words gathering like clouds heavy with rain. Eleanor stayed still, letting the silence stretch, giving him the room he needed. The car moved smoothly down the long road, lined with trees whose branches swayed gently in the breeze. The golden leaves scattered across the asphalt made it look like a path leading them somewhere important, somewhere meant for this conversation. Eleanor's chest tightened with both worry and hope. Whatever Daniel was holding inside, she knew it mattered deeply. Finally, he spoke again, his tone softer now. "Do you ever feel like you're living a life that wasn't meant for you?" His question caught her by surprise. She turned slightly, studying him, seeing the seriousness in his expression. "Sometimes," she admitted honestly. "When I was young, I dreamed of things I never had the courage to chase. Life has a way of pushing us down paths we didn't always choose." Daniel nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on the horizon. His voice grew steadier, though heavy with emotion. That's how I feel. Like I've been following a script written by everyone else. Family, friends, even society. And the more I go along with it, the more I feel like I'm losing myself. Eleanor's heart ached at his words. She wanted to reach across and hug him, but she knew this wasn't the moment for comfort. It was the moment for truth. She spoke softly, carefully. What is it you truly want, Daniel? Not what others expect, but what your heart is asking for. He hesitated, and for a moment the only sound was the car's engine and the whisper of wind outside. Then he answered, his voice trembling. I want a life that feels real. Not one that looks perfect on the outside but leaves me empty inside. Eleanor studied him quietly, feeling her throat tighten with emotion. She could see the pain in his eyes, but also the courage it took for him to say those words out loud. She remembered her own youth, the dreams she had sacrificed, the choices she had made to please others. She felt the weight of his confession as though it belonged to her too. Daniel gripped the wheel tighter, his knuckles white again. I thought I was strong enough to carry it all, he continued, his voice breaking slightly. But lately, I feel like I'm suffocating under the weight of everyone else's expectations. It's like I'm living someone else's dream, not mine. Eleanor placed her hand gently on his arm, steady and reassuring. Her voice was calm, but firm with conviction. Daniel, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit that you want something different. You don't owe the world a version of yourself that makes you miserable. You only owe yourself honesty. Her words seemed to settle over him like a soft blanket. For a moment, Daniel didn't speak, but his shoulders lowered slightly, the tension in his body easing just enough to show her he had heard her. He swallowed hard, his throat working, his eyes blinking rapidly as if holding back tears. The car continued its steady rhythm down the road, the sky darkening with every passing minute. Eleanor leaned back, giving him time again. She knew he was on the edge of saying more, that his heart was carrying something even deeper than this. She had lived long enough to recognize when a confession had more layers waiting underneath. Daniel's lips parted, then closed. He tapped his fingers lightly against the wheel, a nervous habit she remembered from his childhood. Then, finally, he spoke again, his voice quieter than before, almost a whisper. Grandma. There's more, something I've never told anyone. Eleanor's chest tightened with both fear and tenderness. She turned her eyes to him, her expression gentle, encouraging. Then tell me, Daniel. Whatever it is, I'm here. Nothing you say will change how much I love you. Daniel glanced at her, and this time, his eyes didn't hide. They were filled with raw honesty, with a heaviness he had carried too long. His lips trembled, but the determination in his gaze told her the words were finally coming. The silence inside the car deepened again, but now it was thick with anticipation. Eleanor knew the moment was fragile, that one wrong word might close him off again. She stayed perfectly still, her heart beating faster, her mind replaying every sign she had seen in him over the years. Finally, Daniel drew a long, shaky breath. His voice came out rough, but steady enough to break the barrier he had kept for so long. I've been hiding what I really want, because I was afraid of what people would think. Eleanor felt her own breath catch, the air between them growing heavier. She reached for his hand this time, holding it with quiet strength. Then trust me with your truth, she said softly. Let it out. You've carried it alone long enough. Daniel looked at her briefly, his eyes wet with unshed tears, before returning to the road. His lips parted again, and Eleanor braced herself, knowing the confession she had been waiting for was about to fall into the open at last. The car rolled on, headlights cutting through the growing dusk. The dusk settled deeper, casting shadows across the winding road as the car pushed forward. Eleanor could feel Daniel's tension building, like a dam straining to hold back rushing water. His jaw was set, his eyes fixed on the stretch of highway ahead, but his breathing gave him away, uneven, quick, full of nerves. She had seen this before in her children when they were young, when they had something too heavy for their small hearts to carry. Now, watching her grandson, she knew the weight was greater, the truth more complex. Daniel finally spoke, his voice low, almost swallowed by the hum of the tires. "Grandma, do you ever feel like your heart wants something your life won't allow?" Eleanor turned her head, her gaze softening. She let his words hang for a moment before answering. "Yes, Daniel. Many times. Dreams, choices, even love, it isn't always simple. Sometimes the life we live doesn't match the life we imagined." Her answer seemed to give him the courage he needed. His grip on the wheel loosened slightly, though his hand still trembled. "That's what I've been feeling. Like I've been pretending. I go to work. I laugh with friends. I nod when people tell me what I should want. But deep inside, I know I'm not being honest with myself." His words came faster now, like water breaking through cracks in stone. "And I'm scared, because what I really want, it doesn't look like what everyone expects from me." Eleanor's chest ached, but she kept her tone steady, encouraging. "Daniel, honesty with yourself is the only way to find peace. Pretending may satisfy others, but it will never satisfy your heart." Daniel swallowed hard, his Adam's apple shifting as he struggled to continue. "I've carried this for years, Grandma. I thought if I ignored it, it would go away. I thought maybe if I worked harder, if I fit into the picture people painted for me, I'd start to believe it was enough. But it isn't. It never was." His voice cracked slightly, and he blinked quickly, trying to clear the wetness gathering in his eyes. Eleanor reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded tissue, pressing it into his free hand. He smiled faintly, though his lips trembled. "Thanks," he murmured. She nodded gently, her own heart tightening. She had been waiting for this, for the moment when his guard finally lowered. The car moved into a quiet stretch of road, the forest thick on both sides. The world outside felt distant, as though only the two of them existed within the small bubble of the car. Daniel's voice broke through the stillness again, softer this time. "Grandma, I don't want the life they've chosen for me. I don't want the career path everyone praises, but that leaves me feeling empty. I don't want the kind of marriage people assume I'll have, just because it looks right to them." Eleanor inhaled slowly, choosing her words carefully. "Then what do you want, Daniel? Speak it, even if it feels hard. Sometimes saying it out loud is the first step toward living it." He hesitated, his hands tightening again on the wheel. His lips parted, then closed. For a moment, Eleanor thought he might retreat back into silence, but then, with a deep breath, he pushed forward. "I want a life that feels real. I want love that doesn't feel like an act. I want to stop hiding who I am. I'm tired of shaping myself into what people find acceptable." His words spilled out quickly, raw and unfiltered, and Eleanor could almost feel the relief in them. He was letting go of years of fear, of nights spent rehearsing conversations that never left his lips. She listened without interruption, her heart breaking and swelling all at once. Daniel's voice grew quieter, as though confessing something sacred. "I've been afraid, Grandma. Afraid that if I tell the truth, people will turn their backs, that I'll lose the family I love, that I'll disappoint everyone who believed I would follow the path they laid out for me." Eleanor couldn't hold back anymore. She reached over and laid her hand on his shoulder, steady and warm. "Daniel," she said softly but firmly, "love is never something to be ashamed of. The only shame is in denying it." Her words seemed to shake him, his eyes flicking toward her with a mixture of surprise and relief. His lips quivered as he whispered, "But what if I lose everything because of it?" Eleanor's voice was calm, carrying the weight of her years of wisdom. "Then you will still have me? And sometimes, one person's love and acceptance is enough to give you the strength to stand on your own. If the rest of the world doesn't understand, then let them walk their path while you walk yours." Daniel's breath caught, and for the first time during the ride, his expression softened. He looked younger in that moment, like the boy who used to run to her for comfort after a hard day. But beneath that boyish look was a man finally beginning to face his truth. The car turned a bend, and the first faint stars appeared in the darkening sky. Daniel's hands were steadier now, though his heart was still racing. Eleanor knew his confession wasn't fully spoken yet, but this was the beginning. The walls were coming down piece by piece, and soon he would let her see all of it. She sat quietly, her eyes glistening. She thought of her own past, the times she had silenced her heart for the sake of appearances, the moments when fear of judgment had kept her from choices that might have brought her joy. She didn't want that fate for Daniel. She wanted him to be free in ways she never was. Daniel finally broke the silence again. His voice was firmer, though still gentle. I don't want to live in shadows anymore. I want to live with honesty. I want to be able to say who I am, without fear. And I needed to tell you first, because I knew if anyone could understand, it would be you. Eleanor's hand squeezed his arm softly. You were right to trust me, Daniel. And I promise you, I will never let you walk this road alone. For the first time all evening, Daniel smiled. Small, fragile, but real. It was the kind of smile that told Eleanor he had finally opened a door long locked inside him. The confession wasn't fully spoken yet, but she could feel it pressing closer, waiting for the right moment to come out. The road stretched ahead, the car carrying them deeper into the quiet night. But Eleanor knew this journey had already changed. It wasn't just a trip to the cabin anymore. It was the beginning of Daniel stepping into his truth. The night had settled fully now, the car gliding through the quiet road lined with dark trees. The headlights cut through the silence. But inside the car, the air was heavier, warmer, charged with emotions that words hadn't fully carried yet. Daniel's breathing was steadier, but Eleanor could sense the storm building again. She knew he hadn't told her everything, only scratched the surface of what he had carried for years. His shoulders were tense, his lips pressed into a thin line, as though he was rehearsing something in his mind. Finally, his voice broke the silence. Grandma, I can't keep hiding. I've spent too long pretending and it's tearing me apart. Tonight I need to say it all, even if it changes how you see me. His words were firm, but his hands trembled slightly on the wheel. Eleanor's heart softened, her voice calm and steady. Daniel, nothing you tell me will change how I see you. You're my grandson, and I love you, always. The assurance gave him a flicker of courage. He drew a deep breath, his chest rising and falling as he let the truth spill out. I'm not the person everyone expects me to be. I don't want the kind of life they picture for me. I've been carrying a secret for years, afraid that if I told anyone I'd be rejected, but I can't live in silence anymore. His voice cracked, raw with the weight of honesty. Grandma, I'm in love, but it's not the kind of love they think I should have. Eleanor's eyes softened, but she didn't flinch. She kept her gaze steady, her silence encouraging him to continue. Daniel's grip tightened on the wheel as he pushed forward. I've always known deep down that I wasn't like the others. I didn't say it out loud because I didn't want to be judged, or whispered about, or treated differently. I thought I could bury it and make it go away, but it never did. And the truth is, I can't keep living as if I'm someone I'm not. Grandma, I'm gay. The words hung in the air like a fragile glass, waiting to be shattered. Daniel's chest heaved as he let out the breath he had been holding for years. His eyes burned, but he didn't look at her, afraid of what he might see on her face. The silence stretched, and for a brief moment, he feared the worst. But Eleanor's hand reached across the seat, warm and steady, resting on his arm. Her voice was soft, yet strong enough to carry through his fear. Daniel, thank you for trusting me with your truth. You don't have to hide from me. You are who you are, and that is nothing to be ashamed of. Daniel's throat tightened, his lips trembling as his eyes finally flicked toward her. The acceptance in her gaze was more than he could bear. His vision blurred, and for the first time in years, he let the tears fall. I thought you'd be disappointed, he whispered. I thought you'd wish for a different grandson, one who fit the picture better. Eleanor shook her head firmly, her eyes glistening. Never. You're exactly who you were meant to be. Daniel, love is love. The kind of heart you have, the kindness, the honesty, that is what matters. Not who you choose to share your life with. You could never disappoint me by being true to yourself. Her words broke something open in him. The weight he had carried for so long seemed to lift, piece by piece, until his shoulders no longer felt so heavy. He let out a shaky laugh through his tears, a sound of both relief and disbelief. "I can't believe I finally said it out loud," he murmured. "It feels like I've been holding my breath for years, and now I can breathe again." Eleanor squeezed his arm gently, her voice tender. "That's because secrets lock us in cages. Honesty sets us free. And Daniel, you deserve to live free." The car continued forward, the hum of the tires now a soothing backdrop to the conversation. Daniel wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, his heart lighter than it had been in years. "I've been so afraid of how the family would react. I worried Dad would be angry, that Mom would cry. I thought maybe you'd look at me differently. But hearing you say this, it gives me hope that maybe I won't lose everything after all." Eleanor smiled gently. "Your parents may need time, but love has a way of finding its way through fear. And even if they struggle, I will stand with you. You are not alone." Daniel's lips curved into a fragile smile. "Thank you, Grandma. You don't know how much this means to me." "I do," she said softly, "because I've lived long enough to know what it feels like to bury your heart. And I don't want that life for you." The stars shone brighter above as they drove on, the forest opening up to a wide stretch of sky. Daniel felt as if the world itself was widening, giving him room to finally be himself. He spoke again, his voice calmer now, steadier. "There's someone I've wanted to tell you about. Someone who makes me feel alive, like I don't have to pretend. His name is Michael. He's kind, patient, and he makes me laugh in ways I didn't think I could anymore. When I'm with him, I feel like myself, truly myself." Eleanor's smile deepened, her eyes warm. "Then I already like him, because anyone who makes you feel that way is worth knowing." Daniel let out a laugh, this time lighter, freer. "You really mean that?" "Of course," Eleanor replied. "Love isn't about rules or expectations. It's about joy. And if he brings you joy, then I'm grateful for him." The words wrapped around Daniel like a blanket, soft and safe. For the first time, he wasn't afraid of the future. He wasn't ashamed of his truth. He wasn't hiding anymore. As the car approached the cabin road, the lights from the porch flickered in the distance. Daniel slowed the car, pulling into the familiar driveway. He parked and turned to Eleanor, his eyes shining with both exhaustion and hope. "I thought this drive would be the hardest night of my life, but instead, it feels like the beginning of something new." Eleanor reached for his hand, squeezing it firmly. "That's because it is, Daniel. Tonight you found your voice, and that will carry you further than fear ever could." The engine quieted, leaving only the sound of crickets in the night air. Daniel leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes for a moment, letting the relief wash over him. He no longer felt trapped in silence. He no longer felt alone. He had spoken his truth, and his grandmother had embraced him fully. That was enough to change everything. When he finally opened his eyes again, Eleanor was smiling at him, proud and tender. She whispered the words that sealed the night. "Daniel, you are loved exactly as you are. Don't ever forget that." And with those words, the story of his hidden fear ended, and the story of his honest life began. The night was still as Daniel and Eleanor stepped out of the car. The gravel crunched under their feet, and the porch light from the cabin glowed like a quiet welcome. For Daniel, the weight that had sat on his chest for years had lifted, though his heart still trembled with nerves about what tomorrow might bring. His grandmother's words still echoed in his ears, giving him a strength he hadn't known he could carry. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of pine wood and old books. Eleanor set her purse on the table, moving about with her steady grace. Daniel followed, though his steps were slower, as if each one carried him closer to a life he was finally ready to face. He sat down at the worn couch, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. His face showed both relief and exhaustion. Eleanor poured 2 cups of tea, the steam curling gently, and handed one to him. "You're quieter now," she said softly. "Is it relief, or are you thinking about what comes next?" Daniel took the cup in his hands, staring at the ripples on the surface. "Both. I feel lighter, but I also know this is just the beginning. Tonight I told you. Tomorrow. There's the rest of the family." His voice faltered, but he didn't look away. "I don't know if they'll accept me like you have." Eleanor sat beside him, her hand resting over his. "They may struggle, Daniel, But love is stronger than fear. It may take time, but hearts that love you will find their way back to you. And if some don't, you will still stand, because you know who you are now. Daniel nodded, her words weaving into him like a promise. He thought of his father, stern and often difficult to read. He thought of his mother, soft and protective, but deeply tied to her expectations. The thought of their faces when he told them made his chest tighten. But Eleanor's presence reminded him that even if storms came, he wouldn't face them alone. "I don't want to hide anymore," he said finally. "I've spent years building walls, and now all I want is to live honestly. I want them to know Michael. I want them to see me happy, even if it looks different than what they imagined." Eleanor's smile reached her eyes. That happiness will speak louder than anything else. People can argue with words, but they can't argue with joy. Her wisdom settled something deep in him. Daniel leaned back against the couch, letting himself breathe. For the first time, he imagined a future that didn't feel heavy or hidden. He saw Michael's smile, the way it lit up a room, and the thought brought warmth to his heart. He wasn't afraid of naming that joy anymore. Later that night, Eleanor tucked a blanket around his shoulders as he dozed on the couch, the teacup empty on the table. She looked at her grandson with quiet pride, knowing that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but also knowing that the hardest step had already been taken. The next morning brought sunlight through the cabin windows, spilling golden across the floor. Daniel woke with a start, his heart thumping as he remembered the night before. He looked around, expecting to feel the old fear pressing down, but it didn't come. Instead, there was calm, a fragile calm, but real. Eleanor was already in the kitchen, humming softly as she cooked breakfast. Daniel walked in, rubbing his eyes, and she greeted him with her familiar smile. "Morning, dear. How do you feel?" "Different," Daniel admitted, sliding into a chair. "Like the world didn't change, but somehow I did." Eleanor placed a plate in front of him. "That's because you let go of silence. Now you get to live in the truth. That's a kind of freedom most people spend their whole lives chasing." As they ate, Daniel's phone buzzed on the table. A message from Michael lit up the screen. "How are you doing?" "Been thinking about you all night." Daniel's lips curved into a quiet smile. He typed back quickly. "I told her. She knows, and she still loves me." Almost instantly, Michael replied, "I'm proud of you. I can't wait to see you." Daniel locked the phone, his chest warm. For the first time, he imagined bringing Michael into this cabin, introducing him to Eleanor, sharing his life openly. It felt possible now, not like a dream tucked away in shadows. The day passed slowly, filled with small tasks and quiet conversations, but beneath it all ran a current of change. Daniel knew he would carry the memory of this car ride, this confession, for the rest of his life. It had marked the moment when fear began to loosen its grip, and love took its rightful place. That evening, as they packed to return home, Daniel stood on the porch, looking out at the forest bathed in the last light of day. Eleanor came to stand beside him, her arm brushing against his. "You're ready," she said gently. Daniel took a deep breath, his chest rising with resolve. "Yes, I'm ready to tell them. And no matter what happens, I'll remember this night. I'll remember that the first person I told looked at me with love instead of judgment." He turned to her, his voice steady. "Thank you, Grandma. You gave me back my courage." Eleanor's eyes glistened, her voice tender. "No, Daniel, you found your courage yourself. I only reminded you that you already had it." As they drove away from the cabin, the road stretched ahead, wide and open. Daniel felt the weight of his secret finally behind him. The headlights cut through the twilight, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel trapped in the dark. He reached over, taking his grandmother's hand in his, and held it firmly. "This is the start of my real life," he said softly, almost to himself. Eleanor squeezed his hand, her smile gentle. "Yes, Daniel, and it's going to be a beautiful one." The car moved forward into the horizon, carrying with it not just two people, but the beginning of a story built on truth, love, and the promise of brighter days. The end.